My mother-in-law gave my son a used flip phone while her favorite grandchild got a brand new iPhone, thinking I'd stay silent. I knew we weren't her favorites, but the used flip phone was the final confirmation. The Westbrook family estate buzzed with excitement. Streamers hung from the vaulted ceilings, and the scent of vanilla birthday cake wafted through the air. My son Ethan's 11th birthday party was in full swing, though it felt more like a performance than a celebration. I watched him from across the room, his dimpled smile visible as he chatted with his cousins. That smile, the one that reminded me so much of his father, was about to be tested. Present time, my husband Jason announced, clapping his hands together. The children scrambled to the large oak table where gifts were stacked in colorful piles. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to find Eleanor, my mother-in-law, standing beside me in her perfectly pressed linen suit. Her silver hair was swept into an immaculate chignon, not a single strand out of place, just like her carefully constructed image. "Maya, dear," she said, her voice dripping with that sugary tone she reserved for public appearances. "I hope Ethan likes what I got him. It's so practical, don't you think?" Before I could respond, she glided away toward her seat at the head of the table, where she could oversee the proceedings like a queen on her throne. I followed, a knot forming in my stomach. Eleanor's gifts had always been telling. Ethan sat at the center of attention, his hazel eyes wide with anticipation. Beside him was his cousin Lily, Eleanor's undisputed favorite grandchild. At 13, Lily was only 2 years older than Ethan, but the gap might as well have been decades in Eleanor's eyes. "Open mine first, Ethan," Lily's mother, my sister-in-law Rebecca, urged, pushing a small package forward. Rebecca caught my eye and offered a sympathetic smile. She knew. She always knew, yet never said anything. Ethan tore through several presents, books from his school friends, a science kit from Jason and me, a hand-knitted sweater from his Aunt Rebecca. Then, his hands landed on a small box wrapped in premium silver paper, adorned with a tag that read, "From Grandma Eleanor with love." The room quieted as he carefully unwrapped it, making sure not to tear the expensive paper. Eleanor nodded approvingly at his carefulness. "Wow, a phone!" Ethan exclaimed, his initial excitement palpable as he lifted the device from its box. His smile faltered for just a second as he examined it closer. It was a flip phone, not just any flip phone, but an old, used one. The silver casing was scratched in several places, and the screen had a small crack in the corner. I watched my son's face cycle through emotions, confusion, disappointment, then a forced smile. "Thank you, Grandma," he said, his voice smaller than before. Eleanor beamed as if she'd gifted him the moon. "You're welcome, dear. Every growing boy needs a phone for emergencies. It's my old one, still works perfectly. I thought it would be perfect for you to learn responsibility." Jason, standing behind Ethan, squeezed his shoulder. "That's thoughtful, Mom. Ethan's been asking for his first phone." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. First phone. As if this decade-old flip phone was a privilege. I caught Ethan's eyes and gave him an encouraging nod, silently promising we'd talk later. "Now, Lily," Eleanor continued, reaching behind her chair to produce a much larger box wrapped in pristine gold paper with a ribbon that probably cost more than Ethan's entire gift. "This is for you, darling. I know it's not your birthday for another month, but I couldn't wait." The contrast was so stark it felt like a physical blow. Lily, with practiced grace that mirrored her grandmother's, carefully untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a brand new iPhone, the latest model that had only been released weeks ago. It gleamed under the lights, still wrapped in factory plastic with a bow on top. "Grandma," Lily squealed, jumping up to hug Eleanor. "It's exactly what I wanted." "Thank you. Thank you." The room erupted in admiration while I felt my son shrink beside me. He stared at the flip phone in his hand, then at the shiny smartphone now being passed around by the adults who were cooing and complimenting Eleanor's generosity. "Look at the camera on that thing," Rebecca's husband whistled, seemingly oblivious to the disparate treatment unfolding before our eyes. I knelt beside Ethan, placing my hand on his knee. "Hey, buddy. You okay?" He nodded quickly, too quickly.
"Yeah, Mom."
"It's cool. I have a phone now. But his eyes betrayed him as they followed the iPhone being handed back to an elated Lily. We can. I started to whisper before Eleanor interrupted. Maya, don't you think Lily looks just like Jason did at her age? The Westbrook genes are so strong in her. Eleanor's eyes glittered with unmistakable meaning. Unlike your son, her eyes seemed to say. Ethan had inherited my darker complexion and curly hair rather than the Westbrook's fair skin and straight locks. It was yet another reason he seemed to fall short in Eleanor's estimation. I think Ethan has the Westbrook smile, I replied evenly, wrapping an arm around my son. And their kindness. Eleanor's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Of course, dear. Now, who wants cake? As everyone moved toward the dining room, I stayed behind with Ethan for a moment. He was trying to turn on the flip phone, but the battery was dead. I think it needs to be charged, he said, his voice flat. I took the phone, turning it over in my hands. It wasn't just used, it was ancient. The charging port was an outdated model we probably didn't have cables for anymore. I noticed something else, too, a small engraving on the back that read, Property of Westbrook Investments. This wasn't even Eleanor's personal phone, it was a corporate discard. We'll charge it when we get home, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. And if it doesn't work well, we can always look at other options, okay? Ethan nodded, but his usual brightness had dimmed. I don't want to seem ungrateful. My heart cracked. 11 years old and already worrying about appearing grateful for scraps while watching his cousin receive treasures. You're the most grateful kid I know, I assured him, fixing his collar. Now come on, let's go have some cake. It's your favorite, chocolate with raspberry filling. As we walked to the dining room, I watched Eleanor fussing over Lily, helping her set up the new iPhone, their heads bent together in conspiracy. Jason caught my eye from across the room and mouthed, Everything okay? I nodded and forced a smile. But inside, something had shifted. This wasn't just another slight in a long history of Eleanor's favoritism. This was a public humiliation of my child, the final confirmation that my son would always be second best in her eyes. I led Ethan to the table where his cake awaited, candles blazing. Everyone sang, Happy Birthday, and he closed his eyes to make a wish. When he opened them, I saw a resolution there that mirrored my own internal decision. I wasn't going to make a scene today. I wouldn't confront Eleanor and ruin Ethan's party. But this moment, this blatant display of favoritism, had changed something fundamental inside me. The dutiful, accommodating daughter-in-law who swallowed insults with a smile was gone. As I helped cut the cake and hand out slices, I kept my face pleasantly neutral, but my mind was elsewhere. I was already taking inventory of every slight, every manipulative comment, every instance of favoritism I'd witnessed over the years. I would no longer brush them aside or make excuses. Eleanor caught my eye across the table and raised her champagne glass in a mock toast, her expression smug. She thought she'd won again. She thought I'd stay silent as always. She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. If she thought I'd forget, she didn't know who she was dealing with. The morning after Ethan's birthday party, I sat at my desk while the house was still quiet. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains as I opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it simply, Eleanor. I paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard, wondering if I was overreacting. Then I remembered Ethan's face when he saw that scratched-up flip phone, the momentary flash of hurt before he covered it with a brave smile. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was finally reacting. I began typing, documenting everything I could remember. Dates, quotes, incidents. The time Eleanor had forgotten to include Ethan in the family Christmas card photo. The dance recital of Lily she'd flown across the country to attend, while missing Ethan's science fair where he'd won first place. The college fund she'd started for Lily, but not for Ethan. And now, the phone incident, the most public and undeniable display of favoritism yet. What are you working on so early? Jason's sleepy voice startled me. I quickly minimized the document. Just catching up on some work emails. I lied, feeling a twinge of guilt. Jason loved his mother despite her flaws, and I wasn't ready to show him the extent of my documentation yet. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," he yawned, patting over to kiss the top of my head. "Mom texted. She wants us to come over for Sunday dinner this weekend." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sounds good." After Jason left for work and Ethan for school, I returned to my document. I created sections, categories of Eleanor's behavior patterns. I started a timeline. Then I created a separate folder on my encrypted cloud storage and began uploading evidence, photographs, screenshots of text messages, emails. Over the next few weeks, my digital journal grew. I recorded how Eleanor insisted on calling Ethan by his full name, Ethan James, claiming his given name was too common, while she'd given Lily an affectionate nickname, Lily Bell. I noted how at Sunday dinners, she served Lily's favorite foods while forgetting Ethan's allergies. I documented the $500 back-to-school gift card for Lily versus the $50 one for Ethan. Some might call it obsessive. I called it necessary. "Mom, I think Grandma forgot my birthday is in April, not March," Ethan said one evening, showing me a birthday card from Eleanor that had arrived a month early. Inside was a $20 bill. I examined the envelope. "Let me see that, honey." The postmark showed it had been mailed just 2 days ago. No mistake about the month. Just another small slight. "I think the mail must have been slow," I said, sparing him the truth. I took a photo of the card and envelope, then added it to my growing collection. One rainy afternoon, I overheard Eleanor on the phone with Rebecca while I was supposed to be in the garden. She didn't know I'd come inside to grab an umbrella. "Of course Lily should apply to Westbrook Academy," Eleanor was saying. "I've already spoken to the headmaster. The scholarship is practically guaranteed. It's the least they can do after all our family's donations. Not like Maya's boy who'll probably end up at that public school down the road. You know, with his academic challenges." Academic challenges? Ethan had dyslexia, yes, but he worked twice as hard as any child I knew and maintained a solid B+ average. The casual dismissal of his potential made my blood boil. I quietly recorded the conversation on my phone, adding another entry to my digital archive. Jason remained oblivious to my documentation project. He noticed Eleanor's preferential treatment, but always excused it. "Mom's just old-fashioned," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But the evidence I was collecting told a different story, one of deliberate, systematic favoritism. 3 months after Ethan's birthday, Eleanor hosted a family dinner to announce she was downsizing. "This house is simply too large for one person," she sighed dramatically at the dining table. "I've been thinking of renovating the East Wing for Rebecca and her family to move in permanently. They could use the extra space with Lily's piano lessons and sports equipment." Rebecca beamed while Jason frowned slightly. "What about our wing, Mom?" he asked. "We've been talking about renovating Ethan's room since it's getting small for him." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Actually, dear, I was thinking it might be time for you 3 to find your own place. You've been talking about wanting more independence, haven't you?" Jason and I exchanged confused glances. We had never expressed any such desire. "But this has been our home for 5 years," I said carefully. "Since your father passed, and you asked us to move in to help maintain the property." Eleanor's smile tightened. "Yes, and I'm grateful. But circumstances change. Besides, wouldn't you prefer something cozier? This house has been in the Westbrook family for generations. It should really stay with those who carry the name forward." The implication was clear. Rebecca's daughter Lily was a true Westbrook. My son, who had my surname as his middle name, somehow wasn't. That night, I added this conversation to my document. Then I did something I hadn't planned on yet. I began researching property laws and inheritance rights. If Eleanor thought she could push us out while installing her favorite grandchild in our place, she was sorely mistaken. Jason found me still at my computer at midnight. "Coming to bed?" he asked. I nodded, closing my laptop. "Just finishing something up." As I followed him to our bedroom, I glanced at Ethan's door, slightly ajar. Inside, I could see him sleeping peacefully, the old flip phone, which we'd managed to charge using an adapter, sitting unused on his nightstand. If she thought I'd forget, I whispered to myself, she didn't know who she was dealing with. My documentation wasn't about revenge. It was about protection for my son, for our home, for our place in this family. And if Eleanor ever tried to formalize her favoritism in ways that hurt Ethan, I would be ready. The house Jason grew up in was becoming a zone disguised as a family estate. Summer arrived with an oppressive heat that seemed to mirror the tension building within the Westbrook estate. Eleanor had moved from subtle suggestions to overt pressure about our living situation, mentioning real estate listings during family dinners and leaving brochures for condominiums on our kitchen counter. Meanwhile, construction crews had already begun work on the East Wing. The sounds of drilling and hammering echoed through the house as Rebecca and her family's portion underwent a lavish renovation. New hardwood floors, custom cabinetry, and a private entrance, all while our requests for basic repairs went unanswered. The plumbing in Ethan's bathroom is still backing up, I reminded Eleanor one morning as we passed in the hallway. She was directing workers carrying imported Italian marble for Lily's new bathroom. "Oh, I'll have someone look at it eventually," she said without looking at me. "But really, Maya, why invest in repairs when you'll be moving soon?" I smiled tightly. "We haven't made any decisions about moving, Eleanor." She finally turned to face me, her eyes cold despite her pleasant expression. Jason seemed quite interested in that lovely townhouse I showed him yesterday. My stomach dropped. Jason hadn't mentioned any townhouse to me. That evening, I confronted him in our bedroom, keeping my voice low so Ethan wouldn't hear. "You're looking at properties with your mother without telling me?" Jason ran a hand through his hair, looking guilty. "She ambushed me after work, said she wanted to show me something. It wasn't planned. And you didn't think to mention it?" "Because it wasn't serious, Maya. I told her we're not moving." I studied his face, noting the uncertainty in his eyes. "Did you tell her that firmly? Or did you leave the door open like you always do with her?" He sighed, sitting heavily on the edge of our bed. "What do you want me to do? She's my mother. This is her house." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "Because when your father died and she asked us to move in, she said this house belonged to the family. That it would be shared equally between you and Robert eventually. That was the plan, yes." "Then why is she acting like sole owner now? Why is she renovating for Rebecca's family while trying to push us out?" Jason had no answer. The crack between us, small but growing, mirrored the larger fractures forming throughout the once unified Westbrook family. I decided it was time to dig deeper. While Jason was at work and Ethan at summer camp, I ventured into the estate study, Eleanor's sacred space that she usually kept locked. Today, however, she was out with Rebecca and Lily shopping for new furniture, and in her excitement, she'd forgotten to secure the room. The study was a testament to old money, leather-bound books, an antique desk, and family photographs dating back generations. I went straight to the filing cabinet in the corner, the one place Eleanor never let anyone near. The first drawer held nothing surprising: tax documents, insurance policies. The second contained old photographs, including many of Jason's father, Harold, looking much kinder than Eleanor ever had. The third drawer was locked, but I'd come prepared with a small set of pics I'd ordered online after watching instructional videos. It took several attempts, but eventually, the lock clicked open. Inside, I found property deeds, wills, and trusts, the legal foundation of the Westbrook legacy. With shaking hands, I began taking photos of everything with my phone, working quickly but methodically. What I discovered sent a chill through me. The estate was indeed meant to be divided equally between Jason and his brother Robert upon Eleanor's death. But there was a codicil added to Harold's will after his death, signed only by Eleanor, that granted her the right to reallocate property as she saw fit among deserving heirs. More disturbing were the property tax records. For the past 3 years, taxes had been paid not from the family trust as Jason believed, but from a separate account in Eleanor and Lily's names. Eleanor was systematically transferring ownership without anyone noticing. I photographed every document, my hands trembling with both anger and vindication. This wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was potentially fraudulent. As I carefully replaced the files and relocked the drawer, I heard voices in the hallway. Eleanor had returned early. I slipped out through the connecting door to the library just as she entered the study, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain she would hear it. That night, I added my discoveries to my growing digital archive, creating a separate encrypted folder labeled Legal. The picture becoming clearer was far uglier than even I had imagined. Maya? Jason's voice broke through my concentration. He was standing in the doorway of our home office, looking troubled. Mom says the contractor needs to look at our wing tomorrow. Something about assessing for resale value. I closed my laptop slowly. Resale value? She's planning to sell our wing. Not exactly. She says since we'll be moving out soon, she wants to know what renovations would bring the best return on investment. The casual certainty of it, since we'll be moving out soon, made something snap inside me. We're not moving, Jason. My voice was calm, but firm. This is our home, too. Maya.
No.
Your father wanted this house shared between his sons. Did you know your mother's been changing the ownership structure behind our backs? His eyes widened. What are you talking about? Before I could explain, my phone pinged with a text from Eleanor to our family group chat. Exciting news! Architect has approved plans to convert West Wing to rental property once vacated. Proceeds will go to Lily's college fund. Family dinner Sunday to discuss timeline. Jason stared at the message, the color draining from his face.
She can't do that.
That's our wing. Apparently, she thinks she can, I said, finally letting him see some of the documents I'd discovered. The house you grew up in is becoming a zone disguised as a family estate. And it's time we started fighting back. For the first time since I'd begun my documentation project, Jason didn't defend his mother or make excuses. Instead, he sat beside me and asked, "What do we do now?" I placed my hand over his. We get legal advice. And we don't pack a single box. She tried to evict us with the same hand that handed my son that used flip phone. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, innocuous in its plain white envelope until I saw the return address. Caldwell and Associates, attorneys at law. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, though I'd been half expecting something like this for weeks. Maya? What is it? Jason asked, pausing on his way out the door to work. I scanned the legal document, my blood turning to ice with each formal paragraph. It's an eviction notice. Your mother is giving us 30 days to vacate the premises. Jason dropped his briefcase.
What?
Let me see that. He read through the letter, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, anger. The document stated that Eleanor Westbrook, as sole owner of the property, was terminating our informal living arrangement and requiring us to leave by the end of the month. This can't be legal, Jason said, reaching for his phone. I'm calling Mom. The conversation was brief and one-sided. I could hear Eleanor's crisp voice through the speaker, delivering rehearsed lines about how this was for the best and time for everyone to move forward. When Jason mentioned his father's wishes for the property to be shared, she dismissed him. Your father's verbal intentions don't override legal documentation, Jason. The house is solely in my name now. I've been more than generous allowing you to live here rent-free for years. The paperwork is all in order. Jason ended the call and sank into a chair, looking defeated. She's claiming Dad transferred everything to her before he died. She says she has documents. Forged or coerced documents, I said firmly. Jason, remember what I showed you from the study? The original will was clear. Before he could respond, Ethan came downstairs, backpack slung over one shoulder. Morning, he said, then stopped, looking between us. What's wrong? I forced a smile. Nothing for you to worry about, honey. Adult stuff. Hurry now, you'll miss the bus. After Ethan left, the silence between Jason and me stretched taut with unspoken fears. Our home, Ethan's stability, the family legacy, all hanging in the balance. We need a lawyer, I finally said. Jason rubbed his temples. Maya, fighting my mother legally will tear this family apart, and letting her steamroll us won't. I countered, my patience finally snapping. Wake up, Jason. She's already torn this family apart with her favoritism and manipulation. She gave our son a discarded corporate flip phone while handing Lily the latest iPhone. She's renovating an entire wing for Rebecca's family while trying to turn our home into a rental property for Lily's college fund. This isn't about family harmony that's already gone. This is about justice. Jason stared at me, and I realized it was perhaps the first time I'd ever fully expressed my anger about Eleanor's treatment of us, of our son. "What do you propose?" he asked quietly. "Let her take us to court," I said, surprised by my own calm. "In fact, I welcome it." I walked to my office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk, removing a small external hard drive I'd kept hidden for months. I've been preparing for this day since Ethan's birthday party. Jason followed me to the living room where I connected the drive to our television. A folder structure appeared on the screen: financial records, property documents, pattern of behavior, witness statements, photo and video evidence. "Maya, what is all this?" "Insurance," I replied, opening the first folder to reveal meticulous spreadsheets tracking every instance of Eleanor's preferential treatment, financial disparity, and manipulation. For 6 months, I've documented everything. Every slight against Ethan, every renovation approval for Rebecca's family while our requests were denied, every manipulation tactic she's used. I clicked through folders, showing Jason the photographs I'd taken of the original will, the suspiciously altered documents, the property tax records showing gradual ownership transfers. "You've been investigating my mother?" His voice held a mixture of shock and awe. "I've been protecting our son and our home," I corrected, "and gathering evidence of what I believe is fraud. The property transfers, the altered will, these all happened after your father died, some with signatures that don't match his earlier documents." I opened another folder containing recorded conversations, text message screenshots, and emails where Eleanor had inadvertently revealed her plans or made disparaging comments about Ethan. Jason's face grew paler with each revelation. I had no idea it was this systematic. I didn't want to believe it either, I admitted. But the flip phone incident opened my eyes. It wasn't just thoughtlessness, it was calculated. Everything has been. As the enormity of the evidence sank in, Jason's phone rang again. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. He answered on speaker. "My lawyer tells me you haven't responded to the notice," she said without preamble. "I expected better, Jason. This resistance is pointless and, frankly, embarrassing." "We're not leaving, Mom," Jason said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard him speak to his mother. "The house is partly mine by Dad's will, and we intend to fight this legally, if necessary." Eleanor's laugh was cold. "With what evidence? All the legal documents are quite clear on ownership." "Actually," I interjected, "we have copies of the original will, the suspicious amendments, and documentation of property tax irregularities. We also have quite a collection of your disparaging comments about Ethan and your plans to benefit Lily at his expense." Silence stretched across the line before Eleanor spoke again, her voice tighter. "You're bluffing." "The next time we speak will be through our attorney," Jason said, and ended the call. He turned to me, a new resolve in his eyes. "I've been blind for so long. I'm sorry, Maya." I took his hand. "You loved and trusted your mother. That's not a flaw. What do we do now?" I closed the folders on the screen and ejected the hard drive. "Now we find the best attorney in the state and prepare for battle. Eleanor wanted a war. She's about to get one." That night, as we lay in bed, Jason whispered, "Do you think we can win?" I thought of all the evidence compiled, all the witnesses I'd quietly interviewed, former staff, family friends, even Robert, who had his own grievances with his mother's favoritism. "Eleanor has spent years building her perfect facade," I said. "But facades crack under pressure. And I've documented every hairline fracture." She smiled in court like she'd already won, until my lawyer plugged in a USB. The county courthouse stood imposing against the autumn sky, its granite columns and broad steps designed to intimidate. I gripped Jason's hand as we climbed those steps, our attorney Victoria Chen walking confidently ahead of us. "Remember," Victoria said, pausing at the massive doors, "let me do the talking. Eleanor's team will try to make this about family squabbles and emotions. We're keeping it strictly about the legal documents and evidence." Inside, the courtroom was already buzzing with murmured conversations. Eleanor sat at the plaintiff's table, immaculately dressed in a conservative navy suit, her silver hair perfect as always. Beside her, her attorney, a stern-looking man with an expensive watch and practiced scowl, shuffled through papers with efficient movements. What surprised me was the gallery behind Eleanor. Rebecca and her husband were there, as expected, but so was Robert, Jason's brother, sitting apart from them with a neutral expression. Several family friends, distant relatives, and even former household staff filled the benches. Word had spread quickly about the Westbrook family dispute. Eleanor caught my eye and smiled, that same smug, condescending smile she'd given me at Ethan's birthday party. The smile that said she was untouchable. The smile that assumed victory. Judge Harrington entered, and the proceedings began. Eleanor's attorney presented their case first, painting a picture of a generous mother who had allowed her adult son and his family to live rent-free in her home for years, only to face resistance when she reasonably asked them to leave her legally owned property. Mrs. Westbrook has sole ownership of the estate, as clearly documented in these property deeds, he said, presenting papers to the judge. The defendants have no legal claim to the property and have refused to vacate despite proper notice. He showed slides of Eleanor's name on tax documents, property assessments, and the amended will that gave her full control. With each exhibit, Eleanor's smile grew more confident. Then it was Victoria's turn. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is about more than property rights. It's about fraud, coercion, and the systematic undermining of Harold Westbrook's final wishes for his family legacy." She connected her laptop to the courtroom's display system, inserting a USB drive I recognized immediately. My digital archive. The original will of Harold Westbrook, which we have authenticated with the help of forensic document examiners, clearly states his intention for the family estate to be shared equally between his sons, Jason and Robert Westbrook, with Eleanor maintaining lifetime residence rights. She displayed the original will, highlighting the relevant passages. The amended documents that Mrs. Westbrook presented were created after Harold's death, with signatures that our experts have identified as forgeries. Victoria displayed side-by-side comparisons of Harold's authentic signature versus the ones on Eleanor's documents, with key discrepancies highlighted. Eleanor's smug smile faltered. Her attorney leaned over to whisper something in her ear. Furthermore, Victoria continued, "We have evidence of a pattern of behavior suggesting Mrs. Westbrook's deliberate intent to disenfranchise one branch of the family in favor of another." What followed was a devastating chronology of Eleanor's actions, emails where she discussed her plans to eventually push Jason and his family out, text messages to Rebecca about converting our wing into rental income for Lily's future, financial records showing how she diverted family trust funds meant for both grandchildren exclusively to Lily. The courtroom grew uncomfortably quiet. I glanced at Eleanor, whose face had lost its composure, her lips pressed into a thin white line. Victoria wasn't finished. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Robert Westbrook as a witness." Robert approached the stand, looking uncomfortable but resolved. After being sworn in, he confirmed that his father had always intended the estate to be shared and that he had his own concerns about the validity of the amended documents, which he'd never been shown despite being a beneficiary of the original will. "Dad was clear about keeping the family together on the estate," Robert testified. "He wanted both his sons to raise their families there. I've kept quiet because Mom threatened to cut off my portion if I didn't support her decisions, but I can't stand by anymore watching her systematically favor one grandchild while pushing another out." Eleanor's attorney objected, calling this testimony emotional hearsay, but the judge allowed it to continue. The final blow came when Victoria played a video recording I'd never expected to use. Eleanor at a private lunch with Rebecca, unaware she was being recorded by a server I'd later interviewed. "Once we get Jason and that woman out of the house," Eleanor said in the recording, her voice crystal clear, "we can properly restore the Westbrook legacy. Lily is the only true Westbrook grandchild anyway. That boy of theirs takes after his mother's side entirely." Rebecca's uncomfortable laugh followed. "Eleanor, you shouldn't say things like that." Why not? It's true. Harold would have seen it my way. He just had a soft spot for Jason. Always did. That's why I had to make certain adjustments after he passed. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Eleanor's face had gone from pale to mottled red. Her attorney frantically scribbled notes. Your Honor, Victoria said, we have additional evidence of financial irregularities, witness testimonies from household staff regarding Mrs. Westbrook's stated intentions, and documentation of the systematic favoritism that provides context for these fraudulent property transfers. She turned to face Eleanor directly. This isn't about a grandmother's preference for one grandchild over another. This is about using that preference to justify fraudulent activity that violates not only family trust but state law. The judge called for a brief recess before Eleanor's team could respond. As we stood to stretch our legs, I caught Eleanor's gaze across the room. Gone was the smug smile, replaced by something I'd never seen on her face before: fear. Jason squeezed my hand. I had no idea you had all this, he whispered. The video, Robert's testimony, the forensic analysis. I've been thorough, I replied simply. Victoria joined us, looking confident. Their attorney just approached me about a potential settlement. They want to talk. No, Jason said firmly, surprising both of us. No more backroom deals or family secrets. Let the judge decide based on the full evidence. I nodded in agreement, watching as Eleanor huddled with her attorney, her perfectly constructed world crumbling around her. The flip phone incident had been her most public display of favoritism, but it had been just the catalyst I needed to expose years of manipulation and deceit. As the bailiff called us back to order, I straightened my shoulders. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally exposed to the light. He doesn't even care about the phone anymore. He has his piece, and so do I. Judge Harrington's final ruling came down like a thunderclap on a clear day, decisive, powerful, and changing the landscape forever. Based on the preponderance of evidence, she announced in a courtroom so quiet you could hear the antique clock ticking, this court finds that the amended documents presented by Eleanor Westbrook contain fraudulent signatures and were created with intent to divert inheritance contrary to Harold Westbrook's legal will. I felt Jason's hand tighten around mine as the judge continued. Therefore, the original will shall be reinstated, with the Westbrook estate to be divided equally between the two sons, Jason and Robert Westbrook, as originally intended. Eleanor Westbrook maintains lifetime residence rights to her personal quarters only. The plaintiff's eviction notice is hereby nullified. Eleanor's face had turned stone-like. All color drained away. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she seemed beyond hearing him. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, given the evidence of financial impropriety involving the family trust, the court orders a full audit of all Westbrook accounts. Mrs. Westbrook will pay all legal fees incurred by the defendants, and a separate hearing will be scheduled to determine if additional restitution is warranted. The gavel came down with finality, and just like that, it was over. Months of anxiety, years of subtle abuse and manipulation, addressed in a 20-minute ruling. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the high-profile family dispute. Victoria expertly guided us past them with a brief. The family is pleased that Mr. Harold Westbrook's wishes will be honored, and they request privacy during this time. Eleanor and her attorney exited separately, her face hidden behind large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. Rebecca and her husband hurried after her, but not before Rebecca caught my eye with a look that mingled shame and resentment. Robert approached us on the courthouse steps. Jason, he said, embracing his brother awkwardly. I should have spoken up sooner. You did when it counted, Jason replied. Robert turned to me. Maya, I thank you. For having the courage, I didn't. I nodded, accepting his gratitude, but too emotionally drained for more. All I wanted was to get home to Ethan, who was staying with a friend during the hearing. 3 months later, the Westbrook estate had transformed. Following the judge's ruling and the subsequent audit, Eleanor had been forced to relinquish control of the family finances. She still lived in her quarters, but her presence had diminished, both physically and emotionally. She rarely emerged, taking most meals alone and communicating through brief, formal notes when necessary. Robert and his wife had moved into a previously unused wing of the house, creating a buffer between Eleanor and us. Rebecca's family had stayed, but the dynamics had shifted dramatically. With Eleanor's influence diminished, Rebecca had made hesitant overtures toward reconciliation. The most significant change, however, was in our wing. With our portion of the estate legally secured and access to appropriate funds, we had finally renovated Ethan's room, giving him the space he'd needed for years. More importantly, we'd renovated our lives, clearing out the toxic atmosphere that had pervaded the house for so long. I was in the garden, planting autumn bulbs for spring flowers, when Ethan found me. At 11, almost 12 now, he'd grown taller in recent months, standing straighter without the weight of his grandmother's disapproval. "Mom, can I ask you something?" he said, kneeling beside me in the dirt without concern for his jeans. "Of course, honey. Dad said I could get a new phone for my birthday next month. A real one this time." He pulled the old flip phone from his pocket. He'd kept it all this time, though it rarely worked properly. "But I was thinking, maybe instead we could donate to the science lab at school? They need new microscopes, and I'd rather have that than a phone right now." I sat back on my heels, studying my son's face. Open, genuine, without calculation or comparison. "You don't want a new phone?" He shrugged. "Not really. Maybe next year." The microscopes seemed more important. I felt tears prick my eyes, not of sadness, but of profound pride. Despite everything, despite Eleanor's attempts to make him feel less than, to create jealousy and insecurity, my son had emerged with his generous spirit intact. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, pulling him into a hug regardless of my dirty gardening gloves. That evening, as we ate dinner on our newly renovated patio, I watched Ethan laughing with Jason about something from school. The sound of his uninhibited laughter, once rare in this house, now filled our home regularly. "He seems happy," I said to Jason later as we cleaned up the kitchen. "He is," Jason agreed. "We all are, finally." Through the window, I could see Lily visiting Ethan in the backyard. Without Eleanor orchestrating their interactions, a tentative friendship had begun to form between the cousins. Lily was showing him something on her phone, no longer the latest model, as Eleanor's extravagant spending had been curtailed by the court-appointed financial overseer. "You know," Jason said, following my gaze, "Mom offered to buy him the newest smartphone last week. Some kind of peace offering, I think." "What did he say?" Jason smiled. "He told her he was fine with what he had, that he didn't need a fancy phone to be happy." I nodded, remembering Eleanor's stunned expression when the judge had ruled against her, when her carefully constructed kingdom of favoritism had crumbled. The woman had lost far more than a legal battle. She'd lost the respect of her family and the power to manipulate them. As for me, I'd put away my digital archive, locking it in a safe deposit box. I hoped never to need it again, but I kept it as insurance, and as a reminder that sometimes justice requires patience and meticulous attention to detail. Later that night, I passed by Ethan's room and paused, hearing him on a video call with his science club friends, excitedly discussing the new microscopes they would be getting. His face was animated, his smile unreserved. "He doesn't even care about the phone anymore," I whispered to myself, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over me. "He has his peace, and so do I." The house that had once felt like a battleground now felt like a home. Not perfect, still healing from old wounds, but a place where my son could grow and thrive without the shadow of favoritism hanging over him. And that, in the end, was worth every moment of the battle we'd fought to get here.